Turning now to the latest fight between the Trump administration and the courts over the president's immigration crackdown. In a rare overnight order this weekend, the Supreme Court temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deporting Venezuelan migrants and alleged gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. The Trump administration now asking the Supreme Court to lift that hold. This video captured by NBC News on Friday afternoon shows a bus with Venezuelan migrants departing the Bluebonnet Detention Center and heading towards the airport in North Texas before abruptly turning around and returning to the ICE facility. An administration official confirming the U-turn came after DHS was told to cancel the trip, while a court hearing about those detainees was underway. Joining me now is NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley and NBC News correspondent David Noriega, who is on the ground in El Salvador. Julia, let's start with you. What do we know about these migrants who are about to be deported?
Well, there are about 28 of them. We've seen a list of those names. Now, 9 of them were given, there was some level of detail given about 9 of them to Fox News, including some pretty long rap sheets. But that leaves out 19 people. Some of those have actually been interviewed by NBC. In fact, Vaughn Hilliard was able to speak to one of them inside. Now, these are people who say that they have no ties to TDA. Many of them, especially the one Vaughn interviewed, no tie to TDA or MS-13. Those are the 2 gangs that were singled out to be sent to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. And despite some tattoos, it's really hard to figure out exactly why they pick these people, especially if they're tattoos that have seemingly no real connection to the gang MS-13, which has very explicit tattoos, or Tren de Aragua, which also uses a few, although some are more nebulous, like a rose, but there's some that are very clear-cut to that gang. So we've seen a lot of cases where people can explain exactly why they have certain tattoos. And look, all this comes down to the fact that they weren't given due process. So we don't get to see how it'd be presented in a court of law, any criminal allegations in their past, what they've been convicted of, who they may have paid when they came across the border. We don't get to see that because we're really being told to take them at their word.
Okay, so there's been a lot of developments in the courts.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to pause the deportations. Did they explain their reasoning? And we did have 2 justices, Scalia and Alito, that disagreed with that order. Why? Yeah,
it's getting really fractured across the district courts and who should exactly be weighing in at this point. But 7 out of the 9 justices said, in fact, there should be a pause on Trump deporting immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. And they wanted to wait until the Fifth Circuit could weigh in part because it looked like the Trump administration was not obeying their order to give people due process. They first said, yes, he can use the Alien Enemies Act, but people have the right to prove whether or not they're part of these classes that are now considered enemies. Right. Of course, that was the same kind of rights we gave the Nazis in World War II. It's hard to imagine we wouldn't do that in this case. But you saw a strong dissent from Alito and from Thomas saying that this was going way beyond the court's jurisdiction, that they should have left it up to the Northern District of Texas that did not grant a class temporary restraining order that would have allowed this to happen. And they should have allowed the Fifth Circuit to weigh in, and they thought that the Supreme Court was overstepping there.
And I know there's another case you're watching closely, of course, the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the government facing a deadline now to provide some answers. What are you watching for here? Yeah,
this could actually be one where we get more answers than we've seen in some of the broader cases. Even though it's so narrowly about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, what the judge in this case has asked for, and she may walk toward a contempt order if she doesn't get it, is details about that contract between the U.S. and El Salvador. We know there are a lot of secret parts of this contract, how much the U.S. is paying, how long people are staying there, what the conditions are like, anything about how they can appeal or ever get out of there. And right now, that's all been in a black box. So she's asking for those answers so that the plaintiffs in this case, or rather that Kilmar Abrego's legal team can say, look, he doesn't meet these criteria, he should not be there. And so perhaps this is one avenue, although in the past, they've really been reluctant to provide answers on anything having to do with this prison.
Okay, Julia Ainsley, as always, watching a lot for us today.
Thanks,
we appreciate it. Let's go now to El Salvador. That's where David Noriega is standing by. You're in El Salvador, David. That's where Kilmar Abrego Garcia and others are being held. What are you hearing on the ground there?
Well, Ryan, it depends on who you ask. I've spent the day talking to a number of different sorts of people here, including some ordinary Salvadorans whom I've been asking about, the Bukele government generally, but also these deportations from the United States. Generally speaking, the Bukele government here is extremely popular because of the advances that he's made, the progress that he's made in the security situation. This is a country that was previously really riven by gang violence, and that gang violence has significantly subsided. At the same time, people are extremely wary of criticizing the government because a lot of people have been swept up in this very wide-ranging crackdown on the gangs, which even President Bukele himself has admitted has swept up some innocent people who are now in the prisons. Now, also, Ryan, I should point out that there are 4 U.S. Democratic lawmakers on the ground in El Salvador here today who said they are here to put pressure on both the Trump and Bukele governments to release Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or at minimum to establish access between Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his family or his counsel. They have not achieved those goals, Ryan, but they also say that they are here for media and political reasons, to keep public attention on this case. That, they say, is something that they have achieved. I interviewed one of those congressmen here in El Salvador this morning, Maxwell Frost from Florida. He's the youngest congressman currently, and this is what he had to say. Take a listen.
It is important that we draw the line here and that we come here to ensure that we keep this added pressure on the Trump administration to bring Kilmar back to the United States so he can go through due process. This is on behalf of my constituents. I'm not the type of legislator to wait till something gets to the point where it's, so bad we can't do anything about it. Now's the chance. Now's the time to take a stand and say this is not right.
Now, Ryan, the response from Republicans to this has been pretty mocking. They think that this is politically a winning issue for them. They say that it's good for them to have Democratic lawmakers visiting El Salvador and, in their view, advocating for people that they describe as violent criminals and gang members. In fact, the National Republican Congressional Committee offered to foot the bill for any future trips by Democratic lawmakers to El Salvador. Ryan.
Okay, David Noriega on the ground for us in El Salvador. David, thank you for that report. And joining me now is Gelernt. He is the deputy director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project. He's also representing the ACLU as it challenges the Trump administration over its use of the Alien Enemies Act. Lee, thank you for joining me. The government is now asking the Supreme Court to dissolve its pause and allow the lower courts to weigh in. If the Supreme Court does grant that request, what are your next steps?
So we'll go back to the lower courts and ask for an injunction. The one thing we cannot have happen is more people be sent to this Salvadoran prison, one of the most brutal in the world, potentially spend the rest of their lives there, never having had their day in court, never having had due process. So we hope the court doesn't dissolve the injunction, but if it does, we will ask the lower courts to put the injunction back in place while the case goes forward.
And what has it been like? What are you hearing from these migrants in the Blue Bonnet facility who it seemed like they were about to be deported?
Yeah, I mean, they were minutes, hours away from being deported, but for the Supreme Court stepping in. They are obviously scared and anxious. They are not really sure what's going on. They weren't sure what was going on. They were being asked to sign pieces of paper in English, not telling them anything about how to contest what was going on. A lot of them were then loaded onto buses, as NBC reported, on their way to the airport. They are extremely scared. They know that they're still in danger, and we're going to keep fighting for them in court.
And it seems as though these Trump administration prosecutors are using various ways to interpret what the court is telling them to do under the Alien Enemies Act. Right. They are pointing to the fact that the Supreme Court has said that they can go ahead with these deportations as long as the individuals are given what they call reasonable time to challenge their deportation. I mean, do you have a very different opinion of what reasonable time means than what some of these Trump administration lawyers do?
Oh, absolutely. So the Supreme Court could not have been clear. It not only said reasonable notice, but notice that was sufficient to actually let them go into court and contest what's going on. The administration turns around and then gives them 24 hours or less with an English-only form that doesn't tell them they have the right to contest what's going on, much less how to do it, much less how much time. Under no conceivable interpretation of what the Supreme Court did can that be valid. And I think what's telling is that the administration went into various courts around the country in our cases and just said, we're going to, quote unquote, give a reasonable amount of time, never telling the courts that it would be 24 hours or less directly and never giving them the actual forms. Only once did they admit it could be 24 hours. And after that, they just kept saying reasonable and never showing the forms. This is an unbelievable situation where the government, the United States government, is trying to evade any court review. If they actually think what they're doing is lawful, then they should have no problem letting a court review it.
And I want to read something that White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt posted on X after that Supreme Court ruling. She said, "We are confident we will ultimately prevail against the onslaught of meritless litigation brought by radical activists who care more about the rights of these terrorist aliens than those of the American people." What is your response to that? And is it important for the American people to understand who's entitled to due process in this country and why it's important?
Yeah, you're absolutely right to ask that question. I mean, this affects all of us if there's not due process. Anybody could then be picked up. I mean, a lot of these men, as many as we've been able to sort of talk to, have strongly contested that they're gang members. And so the government is saying, well, we want to unilaterally allege that they're gang members and not giving them any hearing and then send them to a Salvador prison where they could spend the rest of their life. And on top of that, the administration is saying, even if we make a mistake in sending someone there, we won't get them back out. Once due process is gone for some people, it can be eliminated for everyone, and anybody could end up in that Salvadoran prison by mistake. So this is a very dangerous principle the administration's pushing. Due process protects us all, and we can't pick and choose who's going to get due process.
How concerned are you that the courts will be able to rein in the administration's deportation agenda and then ensure that the administration policies are legal and constitutional? Do the courts have enough power here to stop this, especially because it seems as though the administration is moving so quickly in deporting many of these people? And as we've already seen, once they're deported, it's very difficult for them to get that due process that you're trying to find for them.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, so we have said we're prepared to spend every night, all night, filing cases around the country if that's what's necessary. We hope it's ultimately not necessary, but I think the courts are going to stand up to this. I think, regardless of partisanship, and the federal courts are very, very serious. And I think what they're going to demand is that the administration provide due process and allow them to really look at these issues. And so we're hopeful that the federal courts will stand up to this and will not let the administration continue to evade review.
Okay, Lee Gelernt, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.